Hi, everybody. You're joining us again for another episode of Fragrantica Talks with Adam and Nicola. And it's a special episode today because Adam and I had the chance to meet actually in person last week. So I did a trip from Old York to New York, and Adam came down or across, Adam? Is it down or
Uh,
across or up?
I guess you could say across and a little bit down. I was coming
Yeah.
from Massachusetts and we met up in Manhattan, so that's across and down for sure.
Yeah.
What
So
are
we
cardinal directions after all?
We met up in Manhattan and did a tour of some of the perfume spots we've both been really excited to try out. So we thought today we'd give you a little tour of some of the hottest places to buy perfume in New York City, and just talk through our experiences there and how I found American shopping, and some of the amazing customer service we had. We are going to do a companion article to this piece as well, and in that article we're going to go into the scents a little bit more. So we'll mention them here, but we wanted to pick out some real standout fragrances that we came across whilst we were out there. So yeah, so let's dive in. So do you want to talk us through where we started, Adam?
Yeah, so just to piggyback off that for just a second, I will say I think it's a really useful time to be doing this episode just because I think everybody's starting to kind of ease into trips like you have. It's like starting to come out into the world a little bit and experience what we've been missing for a couple of years. So, you know, obviously New York City is probably the fragrance city in the USA, I would say. I mean, San Francisco has a ton of really amazing shops. I mean, the Oregon area, I feel like has a couple. I think Fumery in Portland, but um, New York City is really probably the epicenter of where you can go fragrance shopping, on foot. Really, there's no
Mm,
other area that kind of offers as many options. So it was really great to meet up there with you, and hopefully we can give people an idea for their own itineraries if they're hoping to get to New York in the next few weeks or few months.
yeah. And
So
we
yeah,
had such fun, didn't we? I mean, I don't know about our listeners and viewers, but for me, I quite often drag non-fragrance people round fragrance shops, and their like energy for the first two is quite good, and they're quite interested. But by shop five, they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so bored. It's all just perfume. Can you just pick something and we'll go?"
yeah.
So for me, it was really nice to be shopping with somebody else who is as into it, if not more, than I am. So we kind of it was like, oh, another shop, let's go in. Not, oh God, another shop.
Right. Yeah. The energy that we had there to bounce around and just to sort of spend the day going on like a sniffing tour. That's what we were calling it during. Was pretty amazing. So happy to have done that with you. Yeah, it's sort of a once in a lifetime kind of thing if you think about it. Yeah, I can't really imagine being able to do this with too many other individuals. So it's great.
And I
Um,
suppose the other good thing to mention is that we did both come away with a purchase, didn't we? Which we'll get. Should we get to that at the end? Should we keep them in
Probably
suspense?
yeah, keep them in suspense, right? Like
Yeah,
and hey, we will tease it though. We both came away with the same thing,
the same thing. Yeah, and
which
we
I
both
wouldn't
walked
have
in and went
expected.
that one straight away. So yeah.
We'll get there. We'll definitely get there. So we'll begin at the beginning. We stopped first at Diaz and Durga's location in Manhattan. I think they actually might have a couple of Manhattan-based locations as well as one in Brooklyn.
I think it's, yeah, the other one's Brooklyn maybe. I think they might only have Manhattan and Brooklyn,
My two.
but
Okay.
it was their flagship store anyway.
And Diaz and Durga is a really interesting company for that respect. I mean, they're a niche fragrance house. Started off, they're still independent, I believe, and I think that's worth noting. Um, but they have two in-person locations in New York City, so that's a lot of overhead costs. But I think in general, I mean, they kind of compete with other high-end niche in terms of price and in terms of quality, in my experience. Maybe not everybody will agree with that, but I really respect the house, and it was really cool to kind of actually go into their in-person space for the first time for me, and I believe it must be the first time for you, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It was a lovely shop, wasn't it? It's lots of kind of big windows, concrete, metal. It kind of had that real modern feel. Not cluttered. Um, yeah, it was lovely. A beautiful store.
not quite as minimalistic as something like an Apple store, but
Mm.
kind of in that same realm where it had like the large glass windows, not too much littering the place in terms of decoration, but kept the focus on the fragrances. And they had the testers like aligned in a perfectly straight row on a table, and sorry, and they had what would you describe their kind of accoutrement for sampling? It wasn't like they had scent strips. They had these. Was it the fragrance caps that you sprayed
It
into?
was like a little like a little porcelain cup that
Right.
you sort of sprayed into, and that held the scent enough that you could smell it. So you could spray it, or you could just smell what somebody else had sprayed previously.
And
Um,
it was really clever because the opening to that cup that you spray into was kept face down so that it didn't just escape once somebody, sprays it, and then, you're supposed to smell something that was maybe sprayed hours or a day ago. Uh, no, it really held on to the scent really well. I thought that was actually kind of clever. I wish I kind of had a
yeah,
porcelain cup or two lying around here. So, what
yeah,
were the
and
standouts for you there?
so they've got the new release, Bistro Waters, which I think came out a couple of days before we were there. Um, that one for me, not particularly exciting personally. I think it's based around green peppers, which, and it is very green, but it's a little bit. I find it a little bit, just doesn't say, it doesn't speak to me in the same way that some of their others do. Um, I really loved Amber Kiso. I thought that was just gorgeous. And I have smelt it before, but it was a long time ago. And that just wowed me. And I think I need to get a bottle of that at some point. And I also really loved Durga, um, which is like a kind of really narcotic tuberose. So, amber kiso is this kind of heavy amber on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you've got this kind of, yeah, like tuberose thing going on, which I really enjoyed both of them. I thought they were both really nice and interesting. And one of the things that I really loved about the shop is, and I think it's a great idea, I don't know why more people don't do it, they had a range of car air fresheners. Now, I just love the idea, and they're relatively reasonably priced as well. I just love the idea of my car smelling like a niche perfumery. I think that's brilliant, and it's a great way for me to inflict strange smells on my passengers without them even really realizing that I'm doing it.
Right.
So yeah, I thought it was a great idea. What about you?
Well, I will say that just to your earlier point, they have quite a range of scents at Diaz and
Mm,
Durga, and they've been around quite a long time, longer than I think many people might realize. They've been around since the early aughts, and that's quite a while for an American independent niche fragrance house. Um, yeah, so they have quite a range of scents, and that's fun in and of itself because it kind of gives you a lot to discover. And it was again very pleasing, very tactile experience with those ceramic, tester hollows, if you will, um, and that was just a very pleasant experience, very pleasing, and puts the focus on the scents, of course. But to your point, all their other little accoutrements, like the car air fresheners, the candles, and then their means of sampling. They had basically like a Halloween candy dish full of samples that the attendant would just slip some into a little envelope for you, and so it was all very it's kind of part eye candy, part tactile enjoyment. And I thought that was a really well designed experience for customers. And obviously, it let a lot of light into the store. And that was also very beautiful, especially on the nice spring day that we had. We had abnormally warm weather for New York in March. So that added to the experience for sure. Um, I also think that just their candles and their car fresheners, to your point, are really amazing because I think maybe when a niche house or any house really releases a line of candles after doing fragrances first. Obviously, there are many legacy houses that did candles first and then fragrances. But when it's the reverse, you kind of start to wonder: are they doing this as a cash grab? Are the candles really going to be very high quality? Um, I don't always need candles to be high quality. For me, candles are a very pragmatic product, so it's not like I'm going to be like snubbing my nose at a candle as long as I like the smell. Um, but the thing is about it, they they make nice ones, right? Like they actually
Yeah,
put
they
some
do. Yeah,
thought into them, and the scents for the candles are different altogether from the scents in the fragrance. And I think that's a bold and nice move. It kind of gives you
yeah.
reason to drop that money on a candle as well.
Yeah, yeah. And they've got ones like I think it's called Portable Fireplace, something like
Right.
that, that kind of conjures that log fire. Um, and yeah, they're really high quality, really nice. I haven't burnt one, but just being able to sort of smell them, um, yeah, and interesting, unusual combinations in a similar, I think that they've stayed true to their brand. The fragrances are quite interesting and quite unusual. And I think if they'd kind of done a scent that was, gingerbread spice, I might have been a little bit let down by that, but they haven't. Then if they've kept the standard higher, exactly as you say, and they've kept the combinations of notes that they've used really interesting. So yeah, definitely worth checking out if you're a candle lover for sure.
And we wanted to give a shout out to every one of the amazing, store attendants and salespeople. Maybe salespeople is the wrong word to use here. I'm going to say attendants for lack of a better term. I'm sure every store has a different title for them, but the people working these shops have been really amazing and really friendly. And that experience began at this location. And did you write down her name by any chance?
I didn't know.
That's
Don't
okay.
think
But she
got my
she was
notes.
amazing and we really appreciated the time that she gave us. She was very thorough.
Yeah. And there were also a store that gave out samples, which um, I didn't ask how many they gave per person, but I came away with Bistro Waters, the new fragrance, and a sample of Amber Kiso. So I always think it's really important, as long as samples are available. I don't mind whether they're free or whether I've got to pay a small amount for them. I don't like it when companies rinse you for samples because it just seems a little bit unfair. Um, but yeah, I'm happy either way, whether they're given or whether they're bought. Both are fine, and Diaz and Durga did have that option available, which I think is great, and I would encourage because it's fab. We need to try them at home.
This is going to become sort of a talking point later as we move on to other stores, but I will say the availability of samples in a New York City storefront where you have the potential to have anybody walk in at any time, and there are plenty of people out walking. It is brave to sacrifice that much product to just a little sample, right? And making those available is really important, but I understand what kind of loss that is if you're giving them away for free. Obviously, DS and Durga, they have two storefronts at least in New York City, and therefore they have overhead costs. So they price their fragrances accordingly. I wouldn't call DS and Durga fragrances inexpensive, but I wouldn't call them on the absolute higher echelon of niche prices either. Um, I will say though, I would have happily paid a buck or two, maybe three for the samples, and it's really cool to get people who maybe aren't as like into fragrances as we are, to give them the opportunity to come home with something, even if the price of the fragrance is immediately a little high for them, or maybe even if they might be interested in paying that later for a full bottle. It's nice to give anyone who wants one a sample for free. That's great. But like you said, whether they charge or whether they don't charge, it's just a nice thing to be able to provide.
Yeah.
Almost a necessity, I would argue.
I agree, yeah. I mean, I would never buy a bottle, not now anyway. Maybe when I started out, I did occasionally. I occasionally blind bought, and I occasionally went off one, kind of going into the shop, spraying it on my skin, and going, yeah, I like that, I'll buy it. But I got stung too many times by doing that. I made too many mistakes, and I'm not somebody that is able to be frivolous. I don't have very deep pockets, so every purchase is considered for me, and I like to sort of slowly buy. So for me, being able to go away with a sample that I can then wear, and it might sit in a drawer for 3 months, and then I'll come back to it and think, oh, actually, that's really good. Um, and yeah, I won't buy a fragrance now unless I can try it and try it, take away a sample and try it multiple times in my own environment, wearing it for work, wearing it for a night out, wearing it just during the day. Does it annoy me? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Um, so I'm deeply put off by brands that don't make samples available either, in any form. But yeah, let's come back to that.
So where did we go from there, Nicola? We went to mise en cere next, correct?
Yes, we did, yeah. And very different feel, very much more to my kind of nose, European smelling fragrances, like fragrances in the grand tradition of perfumery. Um, Again, a beautiful shop, much smaller, sort of. Whereas Diaz and Durga was wide and shallow in terms of the shop layout, Mise en Cere was very narrow and very deep. Um, and again, a lot of the sort of modern, high quality. That to me looked more like I would expect a luxury goods shop to look like. There's a lots of chrome and mirrors and a small amount of nice photography of the perfumer, which is Alberto Morillas, on the wall. But again, the customer service we got there was superb. The lady whose card I've got not with me, but we'll drop her name in the written article. So attentive and so keen to find scents that we would like. Because
Without
I
being
found with me,
pushy either. That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, she wasn't pushy at all. With Mise en Cere, there's such a wide range. Again, there's a large number of scents. Um, it was difficult to know where to start with them. So I thought she did a really good job of guiding us and sort of suggesting where we might like to start. And then she was quite willing to give us a load of tester strips and wander off and let us just sniff them ourselves. So that was really nice.
She
So
was
yeah,
so professional too. I
yeah,
want to say that. She was so so organized in her thoughts when she was like presenting us with the concept of the brand, how, a little bit about Alberto Morias and his experience as a perfumer, doing work for plenty of other houses, but now opening this for himself, his own line it was a really great story, really great, organized, professional. I don't want to call it a pitch because I feel like that has a negative connotation, but it was good context, especially given that we are perfume people, right? And we were coming in and kind of telling her that and giving her, reasons why we were coming in today. And so for her to just like give us that background and to kind of give us a guided tour throughout a rather large shelf of scents, was really amazing and well done. So I have to give
yeah,
her many props for that. We really
yeah,
appreciate it.
definitely. Yeah. Um, I think I imagine the clientele of DS and Durga and Mise en Cere are quite different.
Mm.
Um, I imagine both to be quite discerning, but I think Mise en Cere are going to appeal to people who, um, have that disposable income, um, but want fragrances that are a little bit less out there, a little bit, they're very wearable, and obviously, that at that sort of price point, they are going to be high quality, but they're a little bit more traditional, I would say, and I don't mean that in a bad way. They are just more. Um, I don't know. I could kind of imagine walking through Paris or, um, Florence and catching the silage of people walking past smelling like these fragrances, and that's certainly not a bad thing, because they are quite lovely. Did you have any standouts from that shop?
Yeah, I really liked Alberto Marias's take on sandalwood, bottom eyesore. Also, yeah, I will say, to your point about it being very traditional and very French, Bois de Mysore, right? I mean, how many fragrances are named similarly that are showcasing sandalwood? That's not a bad thing. It just sort of is what this brand identity is. And so, yeah, I agree. Very traditional, not really my thing, if I'm honest. There's sort of like that French powdery touch to many of the scents, and I'm very sensitive to powdery notes, almost a little too sensitive to powdery notes. So um, that's sort of a negative in my book. But I do think the scents are well made. I do think they warrant their own line. And Bottom Eyesore is really interesting to me because while it does do that powdery sandalwood accord, it also has some charismatic earthiness to it that I think is really fun and really,
Mm.
um, really kind of keeps you guessing a little bit when you
Yeah.
let it out on skin or on a strip for a while. You kind of begin to pick up those almost um, peanutty qualities that sandalwood sometimes has, and it's
Mm.
really beautiful, really stunning, and it's not overbearing at all. It's a nice, relaxed, but nuanced sandalwood scent. So I had to give him props there.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it's like sometimes sandalwood is so kind of processed and polished and refined that it becomes like super smooth and
Mm.
milky. And this isn't. It still feels like a wood, doesn't it? It still feels like it it's kind of got that grainier texture somehow, which I thought was quite nice. Um,
I think I'm able to deal with the powderiness prevalent in it because that powderiness is there to act as a texture, right? It's there to act as that, like you said, graininess that wood has. It sort of evokes that imagery of some freshly cut lumber or wood or something like that, and in a very refined French way. So that's
mm,
sort of an interesting dichotomy in the scent, and I really appreciate it for that.
yeah, yeah,
So really smooth experience, very refined, Parisian-looking storefront, and amazing service is how
yeah,
I would define my experience at Mise en Cere.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, I would completely agree. And just sort of quite a pleasant. Sometimes shopping can be stressful. If there's loudness and lights and displays and shop assistants that are overbearing. And it really wasn't. I felt like we went in there and it was really calm and peaceful, and you could just kind of go, oh. And I felt like if we'd wanted to just have a sit down on one of those little couches in the back for a minute, she'd have been totally okay with that. Um,
And those look like
and
expensive couches, let me just say.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, just a really, really pleasant experience.
It really was. I will say it was also cool that, we had planned to get a stop by Mise en Cere at some point, but we were walking in around the area of the Diaz and Durga store, which is, I guess, in the Soho area. Um, and then we just kind of happened upon Mise en Cere, right? Like on our way to something else that we had typed into my phone's GPS. So um, it's great that in that area of Soho, a little bit west of the Bowery in Manhattan, there's just a few shops right there, and then everything else is sort of a bit more of a walking distance away. But nothing fragrance related in Manhattan is too far away from each other, and that's very convenient. So we came
Yeah.
upon Le Labo next, right?
Yeah, but just before we leave Mise
Sure.
here, let's say that we did get samples from them. They
Oh,
offer
that's
two
right.
per customer, complimentary samples. So we both came away with two. Um, and yeah, that was a great experience too. Nicely presented, sweet little cards that they're on. Um, so yeah, fab. And yes, yes. So then we did carry on to Le Labo. Um, of all the shops we visited, I think this was the one that I was least impressed with. Um, I don't mind Le Labo fragrances. I really like Teint Noir. I own Rose 31. We all know Santal 33 is incredibly prevalent, and we smelt it numerous times
Yeah,
while we are
we
out, didn't we? We
certainly
kept,
did.
oh,
Yes.
Santal 33 again. Um, but I found the shop a little bit kind of cluttered and dark, and actually it was one of the few stores where sales assistants were not really interested. They didn't really want to show us the products. They were busy doing other things. um, and yeah, we didn't linger there very long, did we?
I don't believe we did. No, and this will be its own separate story, but was this before or after our, let's call it, extended lunch?
It was after, I think. Yeah,
It was after. So maybe in fairness, maybe we weren't going into that store with precisely the right like social mindset.
maybe.
Um,
Yeah,
but but like like you said, I did find that the folks running that store didn't seem necessarily as attentive, and some people would call that a great thing, right? It
mm,
depends on who you are as a shopper, right?
yeah,
And if you kind of want to go in and not have anybody on your back at all, Le Labo would probably be for you as a store experience.
Yeah. I thought as well it was one of the stores that had the most staff. I recall seeing three or four people in there that appeared to be working there, whereas the others there'd been, one or possibly two. Um, and so I think that was one of the reasons why it stood out to me that we weren't kind of approached and offered, the kind of walkthrough of the products in the same way.
That's true.
And it isn't, obviously Le Labo are hugely popular, um, but the experience of shopping there, it didn't feel like we got the same level of story or um, craft that Diaz and Durga offer or that Meisensier offer. There wasn't that level of getting to know the brand as a visitor to their store. It felt a bit like, well, you can come here and buy stuff if you want and if you know exactly what you're after. You can kind of walk in and pick something up and then you'll be fine. But if you want to explore, if you want to sample, none of that was explained or offered. Um, so yeah, it was fine. It didn't rock my world.
Well, I will say, so if we had bought something, a bottle of something, it might have been a little bit more engaging because isn't their whole thing that they make the sense to order right in front of you as like a in right, because the store is laid out as like a sort of bar, right?
Mm.
Not to be confused with Scent Bar, the store that we'll talk about shortly, but it's more of a literal bar there. They have everybody standing behind the bar ready to make you something if you want to buy a bottle. And that's probably it does sort of feel a little bit like a gimmick in hindsight because, you know, their whole design, their whole approach to selling and branding is the thing that makes it strong also might be a bit of a weakness because everything feels a little cookie cutter, you know? The scent there are some city exclusive scents that I think many people are already aware of. Um, but it's not as though they seem to match what's in those scents or the notes or anything to a particular city. It's just sort of, you know, you're just as apt to see a rose scent in, Brisbane, Australia than you would be to see it in Morocco, right? So, not that they have stores in Australia or Morocco, I don't believe, but point being, they don't really customize each location. Everything just sort of feels like the same store is the same in New York as it is in San Francisco. So that's one weakness to me, even though the actual branding is very obviously them. A Le Labo bottle when you look at it, you can see a
Mm.
little cartoon drawing of a Le Labo bottle and still identify it as such. And that's a marketer's dream, but it's also what makes the in-store experience, I think, a little less than exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so probably my least favorite of the ones we visited.
I'd
Like
say
I
I
say,
definitely agree. I
yeah.
worthy of stopping in if you've never experienced the sense before. Um, there's certainly nothing short of at least somewhat compelling, right? I think
Mm.
everybody has a Labo scent that they've tried that they generally like. Um, so it's definitely worth visiting if you have never experienced them before, or if you haven't experienced them in a long time, but don't expect the same echelon of an experience that other stores in the region will give you. Um, okay, so what happened next? We had some lunch. Actually, I misspoke. We had lunch before going to Le Labo. Is that correct?
I think so.
And so this is just us talking about our day for a moment. It was kind of funny because we found this Cuban Mexican fusion restaurant, and it was really, really good food, amazing
Yeah,
food.
really good.
But Nicola, you're coming from the UK, so obviously, Mexican and Southwestern uh, North American foods, they're not necessarily as, are they easy to come by? And if they are,
No,
what's the level of quality?
no, they're not. So we do have like Mexican restaurants are a thing here, but more in the big cities. York is a bit. it's a bit behind the times for things like that. And it's not very easy. It's getting better, but it's not very easy to get a good burrito here. I have to go to Leeds if I want to get a burrito. And they're like fine, but they're a kind of an interpretation of a good burrito. Not the same way as they are in America. And yeah, so I had a burrito and it was so good. It was incredible. So tasty and full of just delicious things. And we were sat in the sunshine to eat it, weren't we? At just kind of a little table in a spot of sunshine. Couldn't have asked for anything nicer. Um, but yeah, the the waitress was interesting, wasn't she?
She was. And so just other context here, like I consider burritos and Southwestern food in general to be its separate food group for me. I adore it. So I was so excited when I learned that you really liked burritos and wanted to get
Yeah.
as many of them as you possibly could while you were in the States. So I was like, oh, I'll meet you there, right? Like that sounds great. So we did that and we found this restaurant and it was nice. As Nicola said, we were sat in the sun, we had outdoor seating. That's amazing. They had like a little terrace of sorts. It was like a cross between a terrace and a greenhouse because it was like clear overhead. And it was really rather nice. And they had like plants lining it. Delightful. I will say, uh, the waitress was like very strange because I couldn't place what was going on. Like very slow, and that's okay because it's a city at lunchtime, so of course we're not expecting like zip zap, but we were waiting an alarmingly long time for just a
Yeah.
menu, and then another alarmingly long time for like forks and knives and things. So we were just kind of laughing about it to ourselves and just sort of making good conversation. And in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed anything, right? Because we had
No.
great talk, great chat, and who's going to complain about that? But uh, the thing that made it really interesting to me is that for 3/4 or more of the experience, the waitress kind of had like an air of like she's annoyed by us, even though we're not. I guarantee you, we were just sort of like, hey, hi, can we get
Could
a
we have a
water?
menu, please?
Yeah, we're all mousy about it, but not like too mousy either. We weren't obnoxiously, you know, we were very normal people just sitting at a very normal
Yeah.
table, and so at the end, we get the check eventually, and we had a great dinner, lunch, and it was amazing. The waitress returns with our bill, and something in her switched. She was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, did you enjoy the food?" Right? Like in a really
Yeah.
earnest way. And
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
were just sitting there like, "Who are you? What
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah.
Do you have a
And she was
twin
like, "Oh,
back there?"
I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope it was good." And I was like, "Oh yes, it was lovely, thank you."
Just apropos of nothing, but it's sort of funny how these things work. But
But it was
um,
what the other thing about it that was great was the hot sauce, like
oh,
amazing hot sauce, amazing green hot sauce that I just was slathering on a bit too thickly and then crying a little bit inside, but in a good way.
it was slathered on a bit too thickly on both of our plates, and not that I would ever complain. The spicier the better for me, and
Yeah.
but it was electric green. It was like the,
Yeah.
the the type of green that they sometimes color rivers during St. Patrick's Day here. It was which is awful, but it was like they super concentrated algae and just put it in the bottle. It was
Yeah.
a very strange color, but
Yeah.
especially refracted in the light, for goodness sakes. Um, Crazy, but
Yeah.
so delicious. Highly recommend if you see a Cuban place walking around this part of Manhattan. Don't be afraid to go on in there. Just make sure you
Definitely
might have a
go.
few minutes on. Okay, so we went to La Labo right after that, and that was what it was. Um, right after La Labo, though, what was it? Scent Bar slash
Yeah,
Lucky
that's
Scent
right.
for those who follow them online.
Yeah. Yeah. So confusing that they've got two names. Um, Interesting concept. And I've not been to a perfume shop like this before where it is like going to a bar, as in there's a bar down the middle of the shop, and all or the majority of the scents. There were some on the kind of customer side of it that you could pick up, but I would say 90% were in racks or on shelving behind the bar, and you had to ask for them. Um, I think here the customer service was. superb. Probably some of the best we had all day. I mean, and it was all very, very good. But the staff were very attentive and very happy because that I find that model a little bit strange because I think you smell maybe five and then you feel like you're potentially bothering them. You know, if you haven't found the right one yet, and you know, you sort of your sixth, your seventh, your 10th, you're a bit like, oh, could I? You know, is it all right? And the staff did put me at ease with that because they were very much like, yeah, of course, it's fine. And I felt like I should, you know, kind of apologise for the number of fragrances I'd got out. And they were like, no, no, it's totally fine. You know, we want you to enjoy it. And they were great. And what I really liked about this store is vast range of brands. And sometimes they only appeared to stock maybe two or three from a brand, but they'd picked the ones that they really liked. It was clearly curated as a selection, but and I remarked on it to the sales associate, and he said apparently that's one of their co-founders' loves is finding unusual perfumery and bringing it to the store. And I think he's done a superb job of that. Um, and yeah, it was lovely. What was your? How did you feel about it?
Oh yeah, I thought it was really interestingly laid out. They are a very unique shop, not only in terms of the sheer volume of scents. We'll show some photos in both the article and here overlaid, but just if you look at one part of the store, you're already saying that's a lot of fragrances to go through. But then you do a 360 view around yourself, and you're like, oh my lord, there are just so many things in here. Um, so like Nicola described, it was just that they had most of them, most of the volume in different specific categories, aquatics. But they didn't just do aquatics in like fougères or, you know, florals and uh, woody fragrances. They even broke it down a little bit more. So like there was a rose section. There was, I believe, like a spring or a summer, like something related to the seasons. And then there was also, you know, the standard categories that you would expect. Um, I think they even had one for the aquatic one was described as aquatic slash beach or something like that. So they did a good job of like making it really accessible to people who don't necessarily know terminology or know what to expect out of this kind of fragrance. They just know what the thing is, and that's a wise business model if you're opening up a shop in the middle of Manhattan. But they also had things that as sort of references that people who are more experienced in the world of fragrance might appreciate that. So that was really well designed and well thought out. To your point, I do think there is something inherently awkward, especially if you're maybe oftentimes a little too polite, like we can be, maybe a little too apologetic even. Um, for understandable reasons, it's like these people who are bringing down scent after scent for you and then spraying it for you and letting you kind of explore it. Um, you almost feel bad for them, especially because at one point there were two other parties in the store with us, and that might not sound like a very many people, but and it isn't. But when you have one person behind this massive bar with a wall just packed with scents behind them, and you have three different parties of people asking for different things, you wonder how they keep their head on straight, right?
Yeah, we said, didn't we, at the time, the mental gymnastics that they must go through. You know, remembering that I was sniffing through incenses and you were sniffing through green things, and this other person down the end was sniffing through, you know, tuberoses. It just kind of be like, oh well, what about this one? I'm going to recommend this one to you and this one to you, and so as well as being a kind of on your feet job, I did think there must be a lot of mental gymnastics goes on here for them to kind of keep all that in their heads, as well as being able to select an appropriate and enticing perfume to kind of get out for us. But the sheer range that they stock is incredible and was very exciting. And another thing that I really liked was seeing fragrances from the UK and also ones where, you know, I know the perfume house and I know the perfumers, like 4,160 Tuesdays. It was like spotting your friend on TV or something. You know, seeing They're like, oh look, there's a Sarah McCartney bottle there, and there was Sarah Baker as well, which was really lovely to see. And yeah, it's just quite. I don't know. I felt like I was, yeah, spotting my friends on TV.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, they have such an impressive range of. I believe they even have a Polish perfumer, Piotr Sarnecki, in stock there. So they have, perfumers from many different countries there and many different regions, and that's very cool in and of itself. You don't really
Mm,
have that opportunity in that format anywhere else, I think.
yeah.
So, I know that many people, Lucky Scent is such an online institution, and especially for people in America, but elsewhere too. And I know that many people have different opinions about them, but I really think they're a great company that niche fragrance lovers owe a lot to, right? Because what's the first thing that people in North America and other areas too think of when they want to try a sample of something? It's really Lucky Scent or very few other places.
Mm,
So Lucky Scent, in that respect, they spend a lot of time and money to buy up huge amounts of stock in fragrances from all over the world, and that's an expensive venture to have that shipped to their warehouse and to have a warehouse big enough to hold all of it in the first place. So I have to give them props as a business that they kind of, they're a business and they're making money, but they also provide a service in that respect, and I have to give them a lot of credit.
mm.
1 second, I have to close the door because the cat's opened it. And I will say, hey bud, come on, scoop, 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 come on, I need you out, buddy. Go on, little guy, come on. Sorry. The lengths I go to. I have to kick him out, but this is Gideon. He's our
Hi,
youngest.
Gideon.
He's also got quite a baby face.
Oh, look at
Um,
him.
but he's
Hello.
really, I cannot hear you yet, but he's really cute, and we love him. He's full of personality, but he
Yeah,
doesn't like to be held, and he sometimes gets into things back here, so I have to kick him out.
yeah.
May as well check the computer while I'm up. Okay. Nothing at all necessary for worry. So that's good.
Good.
Gideon is he's got such a baby face. I can't with him.
He's gorgeous. He looks like
Thank
a
you,
right
man.
teddy bear.
He really is. I could go on forever about him. Where did I leave off? I was on some kind of a
What
rant
you were
about
giving
Lucky
them
Scent.
props for
Giving them
having
props.
such a massive selection.
Thank you. So yeah, I will say something that's useful though is that the the staff, they are not, to your earlier point, they really don't mind bringing things out and they make it a point. And I almost feel bad that I feel bad that they have to break so many things down, but I also feel bad that when they encounter like super polite people who are just like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, they probably throughout the day have to say so many of the same things over and over again. Like, no, it's okay. It's really okay. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that was great. The service is amazing. And the opportunity to sniff so many scents all in one place is, you know, it's a real service to anybody who's interested in fragrance.
Yeah.
And then they do have like little walls that have things in like, reaching distance so you can do it yourself too. So if you're really looking for something that's like what they're recommending at the time, like they even have a shelf that's like, more masculine slash more feminine picks of the moment. And I think that's smart because while I'm happy they didn't call it like, for men and for women, um, I did appreciate that, people coming into the shop might not know where to begin. And so having those like recommendations categorized broadly that are in within like grabbing distance and there are little strips to spray on was a really nice touch.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just one of the interesting things for me actually was kind of going away from it and reflecting on it. It made me realise how important the bottles are, because I was looking and I was like going, oh, that's a 4160 Tuesdays bottle. That's a Sarah Baker bottle. That's a Mask Milano bottle. And I don't think I'd really kind of realised how those visual clues really do identify with the brand before. I kind of knew it on an academic level, but when I was shopping in that emotional mode, it was really nice to spot old friends and old favourites, as well as thinking, I don't recognise that bottle. What is it? Let me smell that one, or that one's a really interesting bottle. I'd like to try that too. So I thought that, yeah, and maybe we should say it is from this store that we both bought our scent.
Yeah. So I guess this is as good of a time as any to reveal it, right?
Yeah,
Well, I can. I don't know if you have your bottle handy, but I have
I
mine
do.
right here. So yeah. Oh, look at you, so prepared. Yeah. So this is Love and Crime from Ex Idolo. Where to begin here, right?
Little
I
unbox
think
it.
you should begin us with this exploration, Nicola. I know we said we weren't going to dive too heavily into scents, but given that this is the one that we actually came away with a bottle of from this trip, I think it's worthy of a little bit of extrapolation.
Yeah, I I can't even tell you why I like it so much. I mean, it's a gourmand. Um, it I just walked in and it was on a shelf and it was just sat there, slightly different hat, cap to the one it's got at the moment. Um, and I thought, oh, I've not, I've heard everybody talk about Ryder, not smelled that one, picked it up, sprayed it, and went, oh, that's interesting. And bearing in mind at this point, just on this day alone, we must have smelled probably close to 30 cents, something like that.
Or even
Um,
more. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So to have one that made you go, "Oh, hang on, this is different," was really good. And yeah, I actually don't tend to spray on skin when I'm doing a trip like this. I have to reserve the skin space for fragrances that are really captivating. And this was one I was like, no, I'm definitely spraying that on my skin. Um, and yeah, it's really kind of comforting but uplifting at the same time. It's sweet and slightly buttery. It's kind of biscuity. Um, and that makes it all sound really boring. I haven't quite found the words for it yet. But it's all those things, and it's also not a trite gourmand. It's not obvious. It's not boring. It is unexpected, and just really liked it, and really liked it from the get go. And I thought it was really funny. I mean, there is a good, our tastes. We do have a good Venn diagram, don't we? There is a good amount of overlap, in what we like, but there's enough difference as well, so that I didn't sort of smell it and think, oh, Adam's definitely going to like this. So I was surprised that you liked it as much as I did, um, and and quite glad as well, because I think it's really nice, to have this fragrance that reminds us now of that day and of that trip, and will remind us of New York, and will remind us of going to Scent Bar, and I just think that's really lovely, and it's really lovely that we've both managed to get the same one as well.
It
I
is.
don't think that's not going to happen very often.
I don't think so. Like, especially not with the Venn diagram that you described of our tastes. Um, so for context, I do think it's worth mentioning. Again, we'll talk more about all the scents that we tried and really wanted to make note of in the article version. But I did want to take a moment to say that I was really excited for Lucky Scent, not only because of just like the visual feast that you have when you walk in, but also because I went there with the express intention of sampling Freckled and Beautiful from a Lab on Fire. And that's just sort of something I found kind of while perusing the forums and um, the listing of fragrances on Fragrantica, where I've always been interested in notes that are like oat and wheat and biscuit, and like not too sweet, but not too earthy and not too savory. but like a mix of those things and like something that is very pastoral without doing the things that pastoral scents typically do with the greener notes, for example, and earthier tones or hay notes. I love green scents. I love earthy scents. I love hay scents. But I really found myself sort of at a loss for being able to say, what scent smells like wheat shafts or like what scent smells like a not so sweet, not so weedy, earthy, crunchy like biscuit. And I'm not saying that Love and Crime does that either. Uh, but I was going in with the express purpose of trying out like biscuity things that match that sweet and savory quality. And Freckled and Beautiful did deliver. I really do enjoy it, but it does other things as well. It has that lotiony amyl salicylate like character that's really enjoyable and will probably be nice to wear in the summer. But it does have a bit of that biscuity quality. I think the thing that steered me towards Love and Crime is that as soon as you sprayed it and I smelled it, I was like, oh, that does smell like a biscuit. That does do that kind of cookie um, Maillard reaction baked good thing very well. And it is much sweeter than the type of thing I normally would wear. In fact, I brought it home expecting my fiance, who has a sweeter taste than I do, to really enjoy it. And she was like, "It's nice, but it's way too sweet." And I was like, "Really? For you? If it's not way too sweet for me, a person who shies away from uber sweet things." I was surprised that that was the reaction I got. But nonetheless, I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I think that certain people will find it not sweet enough, and certain people will find it apparently altogether too sweet. For whatever reason, it doesn't hit me as the latter, even though on paper it probably should.
Mm,
Um, it's so addictive. It's got that lemon curd kind of quality at the top,
yeah.
that confectionery note somewhere in the middle. It does get a little sweet in like the middle of the wear, I find, but
Mm,
towards the end, it does that biscuity, um, just pleasant baked good without too much sugar thing for hours and hours, and it
yeah.
lasts
Yeah.
ages.
Yeah, it does last ages, yeah. And there's like a really, I mean, it smells to me like a really good vanilla in there. Like that
Mm,
kind of multifaceted um unctuousness that you get from a really super vanilla that isn't one dimensional, and it's a little bit woody and it's a little bit floral and it's a little bit sweet. It does that really, really well in the dry down for me. And it's just really nice, really nice. And I smelled Rider, which I'd wanted to go and smell because everybody raves about it, and I thought it was very nice and very competent, but it didn't bowl me over in the same way that this did. But I would definitely like to smell more from the house for sure.
I think Love and Crime is an excellent symbol of the day for us, right? It was, you were already on your own holiday, your own vacation anyway. And so for you to have a day where you're able to meet up with a fellow fragrance friend and like just do this like great big walk, of a great sniffing tour. Love and Crime is nothing if not a bit excessive in the best of ways. It's sort of it's a feast for the nose, and I think that it's a great symbol of our feast for the senses that we had
Yeah,
on this day. So I think it's a great symbol of our experience in New York. And like you, I'm very thankful to have been able to buy a bottle of it and have that sort of symbolize a really great experience. So
yeah,
that,
because I try and buy slowly. I didn't buy my bottle until the day after. I went back. And what I really liked was I explained to the sales assistant why I'd come back, and said, I like to buy slowly. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. He said it in some respects I'd be suspicious if you wanted to buy it there and then. Because, and I like that. I like that approach. I like that kind of attitude of spray it, sit with it, live with it, and then let's talk again. And you don't always, when you're on holiday, you don't always have that luxury, and you sometimes may just want to pick something up. But yeah, thankfully I did. And again, they did two complimentary samples, which was up to four if you purchased anything. And apologies if you can hear weird noises in the background. My puppy's just decided that she's going to itch herself on the floor.
Oh, and the noises
So
that
that's what
that
that is.
pets can make sometimes are really quite what's the word for them? Tactile in a way. Um, yeah, no, I loved the experience. I'm so happy that you had that ability to like go back and like make such an informed decision for yourself and have that follow-up experience with the people working there and get that kind of validation of how you were doing things. That's really great. And
Yeah,
it's prescient of mind for them to talk about it in that way. That was great.
yeah, yeah. So let's move on to our final stop. I did visit one more store because we tried and it was shut at the time, wasn't it? But let's talk about our final stop for the day we had together.
Right. We went to 80s next. 80s will be familiar if you have or a bottle of or have ever tried a scent from 80s de Venustas is the full name, I believe, for the brand. And they don't just sell their own fragrances. They have a house line, but which is what we spent most of our time exploring when we were there.
I mean, this was an incredibly beautiful store, without a doubt. You know, it was whereas all the others had been kind of minimalist and modern to some, you know, in various different interpretations of that. Adie's was full of flowers, full of big, you know, French armoires and massive bouquets of hydrangeas and peacocks and chandeliers and that sort of thing. It was very grand and beautiful to look at. You know, you could go and just look at it. It was so lovely. But it's an interesting model. The model didn't really work for me, I don't think. In the like Scent Bar, it's all they bring stuff to you, but unlike Scent Bar, that stuff's not visually easy to kind of identify. So the shop was quite narrow and very long, um, and they didn't have a lot of the brands out. They had a couple out, but not very many. Certainly within my eye line. And you were sort of prevented from going further down the store by like a kind of desk. Um, so they relied on you knowing what they sold. So we asked them if we could go through the house line, which had some really lovely perfumes in, and there was a couple that I really liked. But then, you know, if you wanted, like I subsequently found out that they stock Miller et Berthaud, which I would have loved for you to smell because they're a really great brand and they're not stocked in very many places. But I didn't know that at the time, and there's no information about what brands they sell, and there's no. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little bit critical, but I did feel a bit like we were given an amount of time to smell the house line, and then that was it. And you know, you kind of needed to buy something or leave. Um, and so it was less friendly, I think, than the other stores, and less. I felt less welcome there actually than I had in other places. And out of all the stores we visited, they were the only one that didn't do samples, either complimentary or bought. And we were directed to their website for samples, which I have had a look at, and they're, you know, reasonably priced, but there's going to be a huge amount of shipping on top of them. So for something that I think, you know, I would have preferred it if you'd been able to sell me that in store, then I didn't have to pay massive shipping, because I'm not gonna buy them now. And you know, there were a couple that I did like that I thought, you know, would have warranted wearing on skin or would have warranted further investigation. So yeah, how did you find it?
Yeah, I also really like the store. Also, Ben again might chime in about his opinion. Every time, right? Every time we record, he may he's getting involved right now. He is purring so loudly. You can't hear it on mic, but my God. Okay. I guess he really had some thoughts about 80s Divinustas. Yep. Okay. Just jungle gym me. It's fine. Um, okay. So 80s Divinustas. Yeah, I echo your sentiments. It wasn't as much of an experience as the other stores were. The actual person who helped us was quite nice, and I have to give them a lot of props and a lot of you know, appreciation, because they really just like brought us through scent by scent for the entire 80s line. And there was at least, what, 10 or more, 12
Something like
maybe?
that, yeah.
So, remarkable patience and understanding of what our goals were, and um, gave us the chance to even smell something that didn't even technically release until after our trip. So that was pretty cool. The kumquat one, I
Yeah,
forget.
Corfu Kumquat or Kumquat Corfu, one or the other.
Yeah, and that was quite nice. I think again, we're gonna save our comments for the article, but I will say that okay, there's just a lot of tail going on right here. Um, I will say that fragrance will probably catch the noses of those who really like Atelier cologne scents.
Mm.
It's really got that juicy citric, fruity citric kind of thing going on, and it's really quite pleasant. So that was a nice experience insofar as we were able to smell all the new scents, including the newest one, and we had friendly service there. I felt bad for some folks who came in as we were leaving because they didn't know about the fact that they weren't really doing samples, and they didn't know that they didn't have any like information about what they were actually carrying there. So I think they came in expecting more of like a tour, and just not being able to receive that at all was, I think it sounded like it was a disappointment for them. So I
Yeah,
felt bad for them there. Um, yeah, they don't do samples, right? And in store, and that's not, they like you said, they will online, but not in store. So that's, you got to shake your head a little bit at that. It's kind of, it kind of feels like a necessity at this point.
mm.
But
Um,
I will say, to your point about how beautiful the store was, that's the thing that makes it more frustrating, because you kind of expect to have more of an experience in a store that looks like what does it look like? Uh, it looks like you might be able to buy very like boho chic clothing in it. You know what I mean?
yeah, or antiques, or
Antiques, yeah.
possibly like it's out of the movie Moulin Rouge, and it's some, kind of boudoir out of that.
You win. It's
It was
very
all
Moulin
feathers and
Rouge.
flowers, and it was beautiful, really beautiful.
Absolutely Moulin Rouge. That's the perfect analysis for it. Yeah, very beautiful. So that's kind of, if we sound like we're being a little negative, we don't mean to be negative in it insofar as for negativity's sake. We just thought that if you're gonna go and dress up your store in such a beautiful and eye-catching way, you may as well give people a little bit more for their time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think they need to look at the whole kind of customer experience, because they start so promisingly, and then it kind of just fizzled a little bit. And I think you could have had an amazing experience in that store that was really memorable from start to finish,
Mhm,
and the kind of latter half of it was left a little bit wanting.
mhm.
But some really nice perfumes and really lovely bottles that they're in. They're in kind of these heavy glass bottles that are all bobbly. And yeah, I thought they definitely had promise, but I wouldn't buy any of them. I mean, particularly they're at quite a high price point as well. I think them, I and I don't do the dollars to pounds conversion. I think they're about kind of $250 to $300 per bottle. So for that sort of price point, I think people are going to want to try them, particularly people who are into fragrance. Maybe the I don't know. It's difficult because if I was super rich and I walked into that store and was able to just buy two or three perfumes without giving it much thought because I had that much disposable income, I don't feel like the service would facilitate that. As a perfume person, the experience doesn't facilitate it because you want a sample, whether that's bought or complimentary. You need a sample, and you want to feel like it's a special buy rather than it just being, oh, it's Wednesday, I'll buy a 300 quid bottle of perfume. So yeah, I don't really know how and who they're aiming at. Um, so
I'd
yeah,
love to see them develop a better policy in store. Yeah.
yeah,
I like, again, the person who took the time to run through 10 or 12 bottles with us, delightful, very nice. It's just they were following a policy that didn't make any sense
yeah,
at the time.
yeah. I think that's really
So,
fair.
you know, definitely stop in, because like you said, they have things there that if you research ahead of time to
Yeah.
know that you want to try, they have things that are hard to find there, and quite a lot of it. So, and in the article, I'll reference a surprise sort of last minute discovery that I made while there. It wasn't for Nicola's taste because of a specific note, but it's something that I actually spent time later. I actually got a sample, and to their credit, the shipping was incredibly fast. We went last week to New York, right? And
Yeah.
I already got my sample in and have worn it. So
Yeah.
that's impressive. So I will say they're shipping on samples. That policy is great. So Nicola, what are some things that you kind of took away in general from the trip?
Well, New York itself smells overridingly of cannabis. That's my scent memory of the city. Um, but none of the fragrances that we tried referenced that in the kind of gritty petrol and weed kind of way that I might have expected. Um, I take away the amazing customer service, just so good and so professional and so pleasant. Um, and I think it was really interesting to compare and contrast what does well in the UK as opposed to the US, and I think there's a lot of overlap there clearly, but not totally. And of course, it was just lovely to be able to spend time with a fellow fragrance enthusiast and wax lyrical about all the amazing scents and, oh, have you tried this and what about that, and oh, what about this one, and that's just such a joy. So yeah, I think those were my takeaways for the day.
Yeah, to your point though about New York smelling more so of cannabis than anything else. Uh, Labo, what are you doing with Tuberose 40? That's your NYC exclusive? No. No,
Yeah,
well,
petrol and cannabis.
Tuberose has that like kind of herbal underlying quality, so maybe they're not like entirely off there, but
Maybe, yeah.
I think we should see a little bit more green in their city
Yeah,
exclusive.
yeah.
Um, I will say just one thing I had made note of while we were walking around is that a few of the conversations that we had with store representatives there focused on how language doesn't really do a great job at
Mm,
describing scents. And that's
yeah.
something that was sort of obviously a challenge for them working in those kinds of positions. And it's also a challenge for us, for people who write about and talk about fragrance. So I really felt a kinship with them in that respect, even though
Mm,
it's not our job to sell anything. It's definitely our job to talk about things. And, I think what we learned is that a good salesperson at these stores doesn't necessarily try to sell you as much as they try to just show you and talk about things with you. And they did a great job of that, all
mm,
of them. Um, but I could understand their struggle in trying to find new ways to, or even just not even new ways, right? Like setting a benchmark for what's an accurate way to portray a scent
yeah.
with words is often a difficult thing that we experience on a week to week basis, and I'm sure they experience it every day too. Maybe just stay tuned if you want to read our written version of this. We'll take a deeper dive into actually what we smelled on this trip, and maybe expand a little bit about the beauty of love and crime.